Well, a couple of you already know me, so.
Introduce you or just go ahead either?
It's okay. For, it's not like everyone's, ganging up on me in my fan base. But Arthi Vasudevan, based here in Houston, Texas. I work for GE Vernova. I lead their OT cyber portfolio. Are you all familiar with IT, OT, or do we have to go through the, yeah? Okay, so operational technology, OT, cyber portfolio. And I joined GE about 11 years ago, so many org changes and still there. And about 10 years in industrial control systems as a control systems engineer. We used to code controls for mining, some marine equipment before I got into the energy industry. And now I'm in product management. Which
protocol?
A few.
Yes.
Is that the right answer? Or I should say it depends. That is the right answer. So anyway, so and good to be here. All right, so today we're going to mainly talk about the cost of the impact of OT cybersecurity, which if some of you know, I'm not going to belabor the point really. And at the end of, I'll start with the takeaway already. So, but don't decide to leave already. I hope you will stay for the rest of the presentation. And so we'll talk about how to prioritize your OT cyber investment, and then we'll talk about how to turn cybersecurity into a business enabler. Because if you are like me, it's always a constant struggle to get approval for your OT cyber budget. Anyone with me on that? Yeah. So, and what's harder is to explain it to your customer, right? Because I see some of our suppliers here as well. So hopefully you have some takeaways that you can implement in messaging as well as implementation of OT cyber. So if you are like our company, this is what a typical boardroom will look like. You have all these folks saying, why do we need OT cyber, right? Why do we need to hire more people? And if you're speaking to the HR, it's always a struggle to find the right skill set. And even if you find the time that it takes to onboard, we were talking about it earlier, Jay, onboard the right skill set, because a lot of people are either network security specialists, right, or control system specialists, but finding this perfect unicorns of OT cyber who also get the IT in the OT sites is very tricky. And if you ask the plant operations person, that's what they are most concerned about. So this is what I have found, and these are pretty much the takeaways. If you don't show the money, if you don't show the value, might as well leave the room, seriously, right? So here are what I feel have worked for me. Number one, please talk the language of the CXO. If you are talking to the CFO, they don't care about this nice tool that can farm all these alerts and contextualize and give you a fancy dashboard. Actually, they don't care, period. They may even pretend like they care, but they don't care. A CFO only cares about revenue, top line, bottom line, profitability, margin, sustained profitability. I should say sustained because it's not like one time you implement something, it's good for the operations, and then the next year, the cost of maintenance is so high. It's like, why did we buy this tool, right? We don't have the right skill set to maintain it and sustain it. So if you're talking to the operations person, then again, talk in the language of, by having something, right? And I think the previous presentation from Arthi put it well that it's always a mix of the product and the process, the policies and procedure as well, not just the tool, but how you implement it, the process. So again, in the language of the CXO. If you're talking about the HR and trying to get resources, don't start with, ransomware risk and everything. No, talk about, well, yeah, maybe risk. Risk is a better word. Like same thing with the legal officer, right? And because many times people in the legal, especially, they are frank actually to admit that they are not cyber experts, but what they care is risk. So if you are able to identify quickly with your audience, both in terms of customer, right, and your internal audience, you're able to identify in terms of their KPIs, the better chances of getting their buy-in. Because I feel personally for me, getting this implementing OT cyber programs is a bigger hassle because most of the battles are internal, more so than external. I think that also translates to your insider threat thing, right? Because you want to train the internal people first. And risk cannot be eliminated. You all know that. As much as you can think you can, no, you cannot. And you can build a product if it's 100% secure, and if it's got every single feature, if it will make your life easy, the chances are it is not super functional in the way you want, and it's not very cheap. So you have to pick your battles, right? If you want to really reduce risk, which means managing risk in terms of accepting, mitigating, transferring, avoiding. You can only do that, but you cannot eliminate risk. And lastly, the sooner you're able to align your OT cyber strategy to your overall org strategy, and I think Aji from ConocoPhillips is here, right? One of the things that Anessa, their CISO, has done well is they actually have T-shirts which say IT-OT integration, right? So they did well. She did well, and the entire team, including Aji, has done well in terms of bringing these IT and OT folks together in the same room. So they understand, okay, is it truly possible that the IT team wants very complex passwords with all these passphrases, if you will, and they need to keep on updating every 30 days. Is it truly possible in a plant? I don't know, it depends, right? So it's important to truly understand for that audience what are their challenges and make sure that your OT cyber strategy aligns with the overall business strategy. Usually I have this slide to scare people. It's always good to get their attention with all these scary numbers. But you may be familiar with the $1 million violation for NERC-CIP. There was actually a company back in 2011, they had to pay $10 million on several NERC-CIP violations. I think they had like close to 100 violations. They had to pay a heavy fine. And I mentioned insider threat briefly. So what I thought was pretty interesting is the number on the lower left, 59%, right, of the attacks resulting from insider threats. Many times people think insiders usually become threats because they're contentious and they want to take revenge. Actually, most of the time, they're just not aware. So with October Cybersecurity Awareness Month, this is a good time for you all to go back to your organizations and to see, even if it's something that you want to share with your team in terms of cybersecurity awareness. And I don't know, if you're like me, I usually don't scan QR codes. Maybe today you're at a security conference, you know that the QR code hopefully won't have more than 5 redirects. But even basic things like that, right? To have your own colleagues who may have something on their work phone, and which is borrowed by their child to play a game or something, even things like that. Because I'm pretty sure all of you are familiar with the Colonial Pipeline attack. How many of you agree? I have a use case similar to that as well. How many of you think it was a targeted OT attack? You think it was a targeted OT attack? I don't, because the cause of it was a stolen VPN credential, right? Someone used that VPN password elsewhere. The bad actors, bad guys got access to that. That's how they penetrated the system. And then, the privilege escalation, they got access to the admin account, and they were able to wreck the point of sale system due to abundance of caution, because the company had no way of charging customers for what they were selling. They shut down the OT system. So it was not, actually, the hackers did not even have to do like complex coding to, and try which protocol should I wreck and which layer of the Purdue model should I launch the attack. No, they didn't have to do all of that. It was a simple IT attack, but very quickly, which escalated to an economic thing, right? So that's really the impact. And Dragos had some cool statistics as well on the, like 83% of the 2,000 odd ICS vulnerabilities deep inside the ICS network. So again, if you are in the OT space, you would probably appreciate how critical this is. So, the graph on the left side shows how the frequency and the magnitude of OT cyber incidents and the various types of threat actors are increasing astronomically. However, organizations are not doing much to keep up with that magnitude. Again, like I said, insider threats alone, more than 50% of the threats, right? And data breach are caused by insider threats. So on the right, I wanted to emphasize something, and I usually share this in my other talks as well. What a lot of organizations do, again, they visit conferences like this, and their CISO looks at, stops at a few booths, and there are some nice tools with some cool dashboards. They're like, okay, let's implement the tool. Fine, you can do all that. What most organizations do is they try to go, okay, let's go step by step. Let me slowly, phased approach, increase my maturity. But the problem with that approach is by the time you get to the anticipate layer, you've already exhausted your resources. And it, like I mentioned earlier, right, it's not about one-time implementation. How are you able to sustain both in terms of maintenance, the software maintenance, license tracking, and all that stuff? And if you have software like VMware who will just change overnight, be acquired and change their business model, you're in more trouble. Oh, this is not a personal problem by any means, but I see a lot of smiles. And so a better approach is, if you don't know absolutely where to start, and again, hopefully this is also something you can talk to your customers about. If they don't know absolutely where to start, make a list of your key functions that directly generate revenue. And if any company, any employee should know that. If you don't know what that is for your organizations, please go back and ask these hard questions. What are the key functions that directly impact revenue generating operations? Once you are clear on those functions, then what are the critical assets which are tied to those functions which generate revenue? Then what are the key risks tied to those assets? We actually, in our organization, we went through this exercise. It wasn't very difficult like it sounds. And if you do that, the chances are you actually can boil down to less than 25 or maybe even less than 50 items that you should be focusing on. Now this, compared to however hundred thousands of assets you have around the world, right? That's such a bigger problem to solve. So if you do the simple exercise of key critical functions impacting revenue and key assets related to those functions and key risks which are tied to those assets, much simpler way of trying to identify the risk and start your OT implementation. It's very obvious that some of these direct costs associated with the OT cyber, such as production downtime, those are all obvious, right? But again, people often forget about what are the legal implementation. Even that you can try to get some statistics, but what's harder to measure is the reputation damage. But there are some interesting articles, and just a rough number, if you do want to calculate, I tried to come up with a total cost of avoidance model, right? Usually for control systems, industrial control systems, you would do a total cost of ownership model. If you buy this control system, this will improve your efficiency by 5%, which means you'll have less downtime and all that. But for cybersecurity, it's hard, because for control system, there are like decades of reports, industry reports on their failure rates and what kind of issues cause those downtime. Is there a direct downtime or a non-productive downtime? Meaning, did it take them 2 days to find spare parts, all that. But for cybersecurity, when was the first time OT cybersecurity even came into the picture? Maybe less than a decade ago, right? So we don't have decades of field data. So a better approach to convince your leadership, whoever owns the cyber budget, is the total cost of avoidance. And to do that, you can use some of these parameters, right? Again, if there is a ransomware attack, let's say, so will the company pay the ransom? If they did, how much ransom? And there are some generators online you can at least to start with, which are tied to the revenue, your network interruption costs, and then take that and put some things like, if you have to pay the ransom, what's the cost of the actual ransom? Or if you have insurance, cyber insurance, what's the cost of that? And all of these things, what will give you a total cost of avoidance model. I have found that a total cost of avoidance model, even sharing that to some of our customers, it has garnered their attention. And if any of you is interested in, you're like, you know what, I'm curious, I want to understand how to calculate that total cost of avoidance, just ping me later. This is a simple use case based on the Colonial Pipeline attack that I shared earlier. I basically used a similar example. Again, October being Cybersecurity Awareness Month, I would urge you all as the champions of cybersecurity hygiene to go back to your employees and just offer a training, right? It doesn't even have to be complex. You can look up, download some free slides from the Department of Homeland Security and just start with this. Like I said, so many, I think phishing is the number one, right? That's what I read in the other day. Phishing is really the number one cause for data breaches. And as you know, data breaches also eventually relate to, tied to OT cyber incidents. So in this case, just an email received, and if you don't have your credential management software installed, a bad actor could easily escalate to the admin account, and they could compromise the Active Directory accounts, and plant operations could be impacted. Once you're done taking a picture, go to the next slide, yeah? And these are some examples of what solutions you might have for this kind of a use case, right? Again, starts with training. It doesn't even have to be an expensive software initially. Endpoint protection, and then network security, and then data security, just having these measures. And again, I'll keep reiterating, right? Having tools is one thing, and I think Arthi mentioned that in the previous presentations as well. Policy and procedure implementing is as important as having those shiny tools as well. All right, one other use case with the advent of Gen AI, and I literally asked ChatGPT, how to rec X control system, X is my competitor, so I can't say the name. It said, Arthi, it's illegal, it didn't say my name, but it's illegal to rec industrial control systems. But if I am a smart prompt engineer, right? And that's a new skill set, by the way. If you do want to upskill, not just in cyber, just for your resume, start already upskilling with prompt engineering, because that's the future, okay? We will soon become the past if we don't know how to prompt. But if I'm a good prompt engineer and I ask the same question in like 10 different ways, I'm pretty sure I can know how to rec control systems. I'm pretty sure my son will learn to do it in like 5 years, right? Faster than I can do that. So just with the advent of Gen AI, I'll move to the next slide already. So this is another use case using Gen AI. If attackers can find out the vulnerabilities in certain brand of PLCs, right? I think day 0 will become day -1, -2 very soon. We're not far from that. And they can exploit. Previously, bad actors used to take hours or even days and weeks to write these payloads and deploy. But the entire timeline of a cybersecurity kill chain has been reduced to hours, if not minutes, from days and weeks. Because it's so easy to, again, write this payload that is specific to this targeted control systems and to deploy the payload and do multiple iterations to see if it's actually breaking. And even these different protocols, because you don't have to know it all now. It's already out there. But having the right protection, both in terms of tools and training and layered security, will really help. I think we were talking about remote access a little bit earlier, right? Many customers, especially the corporate side, the IT side, will say, nope, remote access is not acceptable. But more and more that you're talking about, since investors are interested in sustainability as much as, cybersecurity used to be the shiny word like 5 years ago. Now the shiny word is sustainability. So with more and more investors asking for that, of course, the use case for secure remote access is stronger because they don't want to fly 20 field service operators, right? You can cut down the cost if you just connect your operational plans using remote access. But even there, is it easy? Your corporate IT network will still say, no, you can't do that, right? So, okay, so what can you do from an OT cyber standpoint? You can maybe start with a secure remote access software. You can add some maybe additional firewalls, invisible firewalls, and maybe add a physical jump box and maybe another jump server. You can do all that. You can add features like someone's waiting, someone has to approve. All I'm trying to say is this layered security approach will at least help you manage risks efficiently. So this is something I've also played this game with some of you folks, right? But if you were given a chance, let's put Jay on the spot. Sorry, Jay. If you were given a chance, if you have to pick a few of these to totaling $200,000, what would your choices be, Jay? Let me make sure I think we have time.
So I'll start with the gap assessment.
Gap assessment, okay.
I want risk management strategy.
Okay, that's 45,000.
So if I follow what the industry does, I'm not going to spend and respond and recover.
Okay.
But I won't do that.
Okay. Jay doesn't like NIST framework, by the way. No, go ahead. He's ignoring an entire pillar. But
what type of business am I?
you're OT, cyber. You operate at the critical infrastructure space. There is no right answer. I'm just making sure, Access control, okay. Multi-factor. You like that? For layered security? Yeah? Sorry? You will do the supply chain, okay. Risk management strategy, that seems to be a common choice, which again, risk management strategy is to each their own, right? It could mean so many things to so many people. Anyone else? What would you pick?
Managed firewalls,
okay. No one likes SIEM? I thought SIEM seems cool. Network monitoring, okay. No one likes to recover, huh? No one suggested business continuity planning, maybe you did? Well, all to say, just in a small room of, this sample size of whatever, 10-ish, 15-ish, if the choices are so different, right? That's exactly the point. You just cannot, and let's say an incident happens, which again, Aji has played this game with me, right? If you have a simulated incident of a malware attack, which could have resulted from phishing or any other things, right? You don't know if the attack was on the HMI or is it at the endpoint level, is it the network level or for data security, you just don't know. Even if you had unlimited budget to implement all of this, which I don't think any of us have the luxury, but even if you did, you really cannot predict what kind of risk you might face. So again, what you can do is at least try to manage.
We can't able to, like, there is something called zero attack, so we can work on that thing, how to prevent
Zero-day attacks,
like within a day we can send out the patch and fix the issue. Probably it will take some time, but sometimes it's hard to find like what happened. We are not able to find the loop. What's happened, like, let's talk about there is an issue with two-factor authentication, or maybe there is an issue with some, maybe you can say that a software issue, there is something, a malware inside our software. So we have the people, but it takes some time.
It takes some time.
We have the team.
Absolutely, right? Oh, and let me ask you just one more question that reminds me of the blue screen of death and
yeah, same. What is it called?
CrowdStrike.
Stuxnet.
It's Stuxnet, yeah. And let me ask you one more. How many of you here have participated in a HAZOP or hazard analysis study? I see a couple of hands. How many of you have seen network engineers in the room? Network security engineers in the room? No. And I was a functional safety engineer before I came into cyber, doing the SIL calculations, right? I know for cybersecurity, similar to safety integrity level, we have some levels as well, right? The security levels, the maturity levels, but I am yet to see cybersecurity be part of the integrated design. It is usually, in the OT space, it's usually, let's design the control system, let's build it, make sure it's redundant, right? Let's make sure that you have all these additional pressure transmitters and whatever, different valves and all that, and a safety control system. Okay, now we're done, bye, let's go to the cyber team, let's pull them in. Cybersecurity is truly an afterthought even today. So my recommendation, again, for you all to be those change champions, right? Go back to your organizations and ask these questions. It's not like they are trying to exclude you out, they just don't know any better. So if you do see any design meetings, FMEA meetings going on, please butt your nose, get into those discussions and ask the right questions as to what can be done. Because this also impacts downtime as much as, if a pressure transmitter fails, right? This is as critical to impacting the downtime. All right, so we're actually nearing towards the end of the presentation because I, for some reason, thought this was 30 minutes long. But we can make it conversation. We can, you can ask questions and we can have a chat. So here are a few things, right? Regulatory compliance. How many of you are super freaked out about the EU CRA, the Cyber Resiliency Act that's coming? Is it just me? No one living in the compliance hell yet? So that's coming, right? And the key things about that are identifying vulnerability. If you identify vulnerability, which you should have proper means to, you need to disclose it within certain time. And it's also about incident response planning, yeah? And I think it's going to be completely implemented in 3 years from now or something, but the time will be there before you know it. So, I'm sorry?
3 years, it's a huge time.
You think so? Because many of our customers are already asking for, yeah.
3 years is a snap of a finger when you think about.
Yeah. And our customers are already asking for us now, right? And yeah.
IT 3 years is low. OT 3 years is.
Yeah. But unfortunately, we're still in a world where there are Windows 7 HMIs, so I don't know. Short or long is subjective, but yeah. It'll be there before we know it. But even that, right, like earlier, our customers are asking for that. So, but our application engineers who are working way up in the proposal stage, they have no idea what any of this means because they are really control specialists, right? That's the challenge you will find in the OT cyberspace. It's mostly all control systems oriented more so than cybersecurity. This is why, again, having these conversations, putting your nose in all the way, wing to wing, implementation of OT cybersecurity will give you much better results to mitigate the risk of your organization than just trying to have an OT cyber department and then we're just there to do only OT cyber stuff. I've seen that that does not work. But even knowledge of these regulatory compliance standards, explaining that to your leadership in terms of this is why you need OT cyber. It's to mitigate risk. It's not to have a dashboard. It's not to tell you that you need more tools or more people. It is not just to prevent you against all the cyber threats out there. It is not just to show you about where you are in terms of vulnerability. No, it is to mitigate risk. Period. I've found more success in talking in terms of that KPI more so than something super cyber specific and just scaring the heck out of everyone. Because if people don't get cyber, which a lot of people don't, they just won't listen to it. And if they don't listen to it, they know what it is, they won't invest in it. Okay, and like I said, right, understanding the business risk and tying your cybersecurity metrics to risk developing your total cost of avoidance model, doing things like that will actually help getting buy-in from investments. And I'll repeat the same thing again, right? Prioritizing investment. Trying to secure all your assets will take you a very, very long time and lots of gray hair and wrinkles. Instead, trying to know your key functions, which are generating revenue, and key assets tied to those functions, and your key risks tied to those assets. How many of you think this exercise is actually possible in your? Is it possible? It may take a week, maybe, or it may take a month, but it's worthwhile. And we were talking about assessments earlier. Maybe something like an asset inventory it's like Weight Watchers, right? You can't, you don't know if you know what you're trying to do. So just trying to get an asset inventory will help understand how many IT assets and OT assets are there. Then of those which are the crown jewels, then trying to secure them first, trying to establish processes and policies around those, and then getting onto the other assets may give you a much better success and more bang for the buck. You spoke about supply chain. I know the supply chain security, there have been a few directives from the White House. Honestly, I haven't dug so much into the supply chain security area. So I'm just curious, this is a small audience. What have you all been doing in terms of securing supply chain?
As a student, I not very much particularly know about supply chain, but what we hear about all the data, because we are just still learning and trying to get into the field, what we hear a lot is that nowadays, because of the AI has been increased, and there is no other place for the hackers to attack, because there is no motive for them to get, financially, there is no motive for the hackers to attack, because all the financial things have been secured properly, bitcoins, blockchains, etc., etc. So the more they can attack right now is on the supply chain, because that is where they can get the financial help as well, because without a particular motive, a hacker does not want to attack something and
Right.
to steal the data. So what we hear a lot is that supply chain is the one place which is going to be a place where the hackers want to
Target?
continuously attack and try to get the data. So how do how do we protect the supply chain as from an OT perspective, and also that there are a lot of insider threats. 22% is an insider threat. So have you ever been through an insider threat, or how do you handle the insider threats, or what my question is?
Right. Oh, you're asking how we handle insider threats? Training. Start with training, basic training.
It's not about that, like I'm working for you, and there is someone in our team. Insider threat means inside the team there is someone who is.
It could be both. It could be contentious, or it could be lack of awareness or ignorance, right? And yeah, if it's contentious, it is harder to find. And there are, I think
But if it's contentious, you have other outside factors. So the relationship with the individual, so there are behavioral factors that should be able to key you in. So the tone, the interactions with people. The first thing is, if it's contentious, it's not going to be a hack that occurred from an insider. It's not going to be the first sign, right? There's going to be other things that you're going to see, but you need
Yeah.
and
So
lack of
training,
education
yeah.
and awareness, right? So they are really two different things that you need to put different controls in place for.
Absolutely. Even for the contentious ones, right, there are a lot of things you can do. Again, first making sure, data loss prevention, right? That is something that can be implemented. And monitoring and making sure everyone has the least privilege by default, right? And on a need by, you know only when you need it, right? Need by no basis, no by need basis, yeah, that thing. And you get the escalation of privilege, again, only when you need, and someone has to approve. And I think there's also things companies do where they rotate, right? Like 2 weeks in a year or certain time frame, you don't have access to whatever you have. And someone else, they rotate roles like that just to find out, such things. But the other thing that we spoke about, right? If you're reusing your VPN, your password that you used on a personal account, something, that thing you can actually avoid, right? So anything else on supply chain security that you all want to talk about? I know SBOM is such a fancy word that's thrown so much out there, but no one knows what actually to do with it. Collecting a software bill of material is so damn expensive, and maintaining it is too.
You first need to understand who your critical suppliers are. That's the first step, right? You don't, the SBOMs are expensive to do.
Yes.
You don't need to do it necessarily with all of your vendors, but you need to do it with your critical vendors, right? You need to develop that relationship, crawl, walk, run. You're not going to solve and boil the ocean in one day. So you've got to do some, the business resiliency evaluation. You've got to understand what are your critical processes, who are your critical vendors, and work your way down. And then you'll be able to show the value, and then you'll find out where that line is if you don't get as much value from.
That's true. And in fact, I think a lot of customers are asking, we have these for NERCSIP, right? We serve a lot of customers in the critical infrastructure space. So these supplier questionnaires are getting harder and harder. All these questions on, do you use certain high-risk entity products? And, it's getting harder. But all to say, this is becoming big, and, awareness. And at least even knowing that helps you have a more educated conversation while you're selecting the right supplier. I'm going back, sorry. I did want to give a quick shout out to Artorio, who's in the room. And this is a slide that they're one of our strategic suppliers, and I borrowed this slide from them, right? This is a nice slide, right? One of their platforms does this for us, but it takes in all these alerts, because many times, like I said, what is your C-suite care? Show me the money, not cyber alerts. No, they don't care. They don't care about cyber alerts, period, right? So one thing Artorio's platform does really well is gathering all this information and providing a context to it, contextualizing this again. Because if you don't know the context, and they have other cool things going on too. They have like a digital twin, and that will simulate different attack vectors in a sandbox environment. So you don't, before production, you can actually simulate something and make sure that your system is all safe, right? But I like the fact that it helps contextualizing all these alerts, and does it to the environment you're in, does it make sense to this particular workload zone, and then giving you actionable insights. Going back to what I was mentioning earlier, that you cannot secure all assets, I think there's a nice parallel, nice analogy here, that you cannot really try to action every single alert. Control systems world, there's something called alarm fatigue, right? That's why there's operators have this fatigue from all these alarms. That's why they have something called alarm rationalization, which is actually part of a standard. So this is similar, rationalizing the alerts to make sure it applies to the context. I'm pretty sure I didn't do a good job explaining your product. Is there something you want to add since you're here, Yair? Did great? Yeah. Okay, all right. I like the KPIs as well. The KPIs speak to the C-suite. They don't say, this does vulnerability management. No, it speaks to what matters to the organization, C-suite, which is, again, risk reduction and impacting revenue in terms of less downtime and quick recovery. So we are nearing towards the end of the presentation. Like I mentioned earlier, 3 key takeaways, very similar to what I said at the start of the talk. Please speak in the language of the CXO. If you're talking to a CFO, talk in terms of uptime, in terms of revenue and in terms of bottom line. If you're talking to someone in HR, legal, talk in terms of risk. And if you're talking to someone in operations talk in terms of minimizing downtime or whatever, right? Increasing system availability and plant reliability. And number two, risk cannot be eliminated no matter how much you try and how much you're spending with the unlimited budget, which none of us have, but it can be managed. So make sure your initiatives are tied to one of the risk management strategies, right? Accepting, mitigating, avoiding, or transferring. And when you're transferring that risk to your supplier, of course, we talked about secure supply chain, make sure to do the due diligence to make sure the supplier has the right policies and practices in place in addition to the tools. And lastly, make sure the OT cyber strategy is tied to the overall business strategy. And if you're wondering, why is it, because I've wondered, why is it I've worked in small and large organizations, and this problem exists, because everyone has, regardless of the size of the organization, the problems are very similar. You have limited resources, and you have all these things that you want to accomplish. So no matter the size of the organization, problems exist. They may be different, but it's a matter of, again, prioritizing risk and trying to approach the crown jewels first. This is just a marketing slide.
So you were talking about something called as...
I think we can all hear you, yeah.
So you were talking something about the small scale, some businesses still not advancing to the operational security, like the control system security, like they're still in the control side, just operating systems, not thinking about security.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have the problem of AI advancing so fast. So what do you think that if those how it's going to affect the AI is going to affect the control system side, or how it's going to support the control system side? If you want to share about it.
In terms of support, I have seen that, like I mentioned, right, even with Autorio's thing, I don't know how much you are leveraging AI, I'm pretty sure yes, but in terms of simulating different types of failure modes and even like simulating a network storm or different types of threats, I feel AI can be leveraged as an advantage. In terms of disadvantage, like I said, there are so many, right? In all the phases of the cybersecurity kill chain, in terms of writing the payload, exploitation, and then delivery, AI can make everything like super fast. So there are pros and cons. Anyone else want to share best practice in terms of how your organization is leveraging AI for OT, ICS, cyber?
Yeah, we're using AI to improve assessment tools
Mm-hmm.
in our timelines as well as. Okay. Using AI to accelerate essentially our assessment tools, deliverables to customers,
Automation.
improve and correct mistakes, as well as catch, I would say, errors that occur during the process. That's one of the areas that we use it, and of course there are multiple uses yet to come.
Anyone else?
You talked about total cost of avoidance,
Mm-hmm.
which I like in general, but I'm curious to see what have you seen more successful, because total cost of avoidance is basically fear factor, right? Telling that, look at this, like you need to invest because this might happen to you. And what I've seen also in the past, that fear factor does not always work best with the audience. So how do you, like, what's your experience? What have you seen has worked well or not when addressing such a...
Yeah, so one thing I've done is I've presented the model that I created to maybe 2 customers. It takes some homework. Use that customer-specific scenario. You have to do homework. You can't just have a model which basically looks like a pie chart, right? It says, impact of whatever. This will be your total cost that you can avoid by paying the actual ransom amount, downtime, direct downtime, non-productive downtime, and all that, right? Loss of reputation, legal penalty fines. These are kind of the key components. Lots of homework, like I said. And there are research articles if you sign up to the Statista thing, right? You can find out for that specific sector how many of certain types of cyber threats are actually thing. And for that company, you need to do some digging as well, right? For how many power plants do they owe and how do they manage their IT, OT. You may not know all the details. But by doing some homework and tailoring it to that particular sector, that particular like industry, that organization, and the revenue size of the organization, then if you do all this, a lot of these risks will actually, you will be able to filter them all out. So I have found that even using that, but doing some homework and making it tailored to that particular organization, I have found that people, you can get their attention instead of just the fear-mongering approach.
So I know that you are talking about all the like in an organizational level, but the student perspective, because we both are students. So what is like some good resources that we can explore more about the operational the OT security and get into the field, know more about it, and try to get hands on it. So what some of the good resources that we can get from it?
Yeah, I can share the very little I know, and I'm pretty sure other experts in the room can add more. I follow Mike Holcomb. He's a plethora of resources on LinkedIn. He regularly posts about specific links that you can learn about OT cybersecurity tools, including one when you can just buy cheap equipment off eBay and set up a small lab, right? And then try to learn, even if you don't even maybe start from basics and then go all the way to pen testing and stuff like that. But Mike Holcomb is the answer to that question from my side. Anyone else want to add where they can learn about more about?
That's a good one. Look at the framework regulators, IEC, ISA. You also pay attention to discussion groups. Look for local chapters, ISACA, SANS. There's a number of things that you can pick up from that. There's a lot of free content that you can self-educate. This is how the adversary is educating themselves.
True.
You know, there's a lot of free content out there for individuals that want to do bad things. Well, there's a lot of free content for people that want to do good things too.
So Iowa National Labs, they're here. They're a good resource.
Yeah,
They've got
absolutely.
an introductory class around OT security and the red team, blue team exercise. So talk to them. They're great.
And Clint, I don't want to butcher his last name, Clint Bodanjan? Yes, Bodanjan, yeah, close. He has a book called Hacking the Industrial Control Systems, which I have a copy. He even developed he owns a company called ThreatGen, and you can look up the free version of it, right? It's a simulated gamification of blue team versus red team. I learned a lot just by watching some videos, and he does some podcasts as well. So that book and his ThreatGen free demos that you can watch on YouTube are great resources as well. With that, I am grateful that you showed up here, regardless of the fact that there's an Astros game and you're all wondering like me when to leave the place so you can get home somewhat on time. With all that, I'm grateful that you showed up here, and hopefully you got some takeaways from the session. Have a good rest of the day and stay secure.